Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. If you'd like to have your track featured in one of these videos, pop on over to the Discord channel linked in the description of this video, where there is a submissions channel, complete with rules, and also friendly moderators around to help you make sure it works all out good for us all. For today up, our first track is in a folder I don't have open because I totally prepared. Here it is, Volsef Lissencephaly. I think that's how you pronounce that. But here it comes, and here we go. Okay, that was Lissencephaly. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. By Volsef. Also hope I'm pronouncing that right. So, alright, I know that it has master in the title, which is cool because that would be my first question. Is this a master? And you can pretty well see, even at the wave level on here, it's pretty, this is a very dynamic track, and that there's plenty of room between the hits and the content. So I'm not that I'm saying that anything about this is necessarily bad, just that for the kind of track that this is, I would have expected it to go a little harder. However, it kind of sounds like you're leaving room for something, and I would actually hear some pretty kick-ass, like, some lines on this, some vocals. This would be really cool, one of those tracks. So if that was the intention, then yay, good job, because this would be perfect. And basically this amount of dynamics is what you'd want for having that much room to leave something for on top to be. For on top to be, yes. Anyway. But just because we have this here as a nice fun visual, I wanted to show something. Also, before we get there though, I want to talk about how cool it is that we can see kind of this tight bass and then this sort of rougher version. And it's great just because there could have been a bunch of different processes. I have a kind of guess at which process we're looking at here. But the thought is visually on the spectrum thought. You're trying to make a version of these yourselves. And this is what both of those kinds of things look like. And it should clue in on, like, if you're trying to focus on this kind of sound design, that like, okay, this really like rougher version, big cloudy thing is really something that's like this, but turned into, not always, but it could be. This is one of the many options of a way you can get there. It would have helped me a lot if I had kind of thought about this sort of thing when I was trying to do this stuff at first off. And another thing we can see is a few on later, yeah, we look at some sort of simpler, yeah, these guys. We see the kind of phaser reaction on these, and then compare that, come on, Edison, with what we're looking at with these guys. It's pretty well similar, only the bandpass nature of it is a lot more accentuated, but that phaser is still the same. But these big rough dudes have one really big hole kind of put into it, and that plus the kind of the bandpass motion on it is most of what makes the sound this sound. And just in anything, like you can do just a noise and it'll sound like this kind of like that yar nature. Of course, it's, you know, depending on whatever source you're using, depends on, we'll ultimately figure how cool it'll be, but it's fun to focus on. This is a good track. This is a fun application of sound design, decent arrangement, like it's a good groove. I like the beat. And yeah, the other thing I was going to talk about was just looking at what I was saying about hits to content. And what I mean by going harder. So you look at this. You can see the kind of straight, kind of relative angle of like how loud this stuff is at the loudest angle, and then the hits on the hits are pretty big. And this is good dynamic range. When people talk about songs that sound better because they have more dynamic range, this is exactly what they're talking about. If we're comparing ourselves to like 60s pressings, you know what I mean? Like that's a lot of that's the era of engineering that tends to push this pro dynamics stuff. This kind of song, though, with this kind of sound effects and sound design and palette and texture and whatever, in my mind, it really isn't supposed to be focused as lightly. And that's why I'm giving a benefit of the doubt with the idea of the vocals content, because sure, that's what they would fill up. It would be filled up at that point. But just for this, just being this, I would push it a little harder. And pushing it harder means putting this relative sort of shelf of content kind of closer to the high level of where the hits hit. And that's just a hard time. Like, you could do that, as I described. That's just what compression does. But the trouble with it is the reason why this sounds good in a very technical sense and also in a real sense is because of the literal, like, I almost said sound design again, dynamic range. And our job with making it the big sausage, like that you see normally at the ends of these chains, is that this actually is still true, but now it's true to spectral sense, and it's true to spectral sense in such a way that adds up in total sense to being that kind of sausagey experience. So in reality, that's that I almost called sound design again. It's related to sound design, but it's dynamic range and it's mixing and mastering. Like at the fourth or fifth level is this related to sound design, but the idea of it is that you're still going to have the dynamic range, and it'll still be about like this. Like, this is what I would expect to see, like sub and kick sub, and then like snare, and then everything else, and then all the high frequencies kind of mush together depending on how your texture goes. That's like the how you do high frequency mix in cooking is a little bit like how much like salt and pepper and spice do you like on stuff. It's totally to taste ideas, but like, well, your mid-range and low-range stuff is like your pasta and other things that you absolutely can screw up and in a way that is recognizable. That was a lot to talk about this track. That was actually just pretty good across the board. Thank you, Volsef, for that. Moving on, if I can find the folder with all the stuff in it. There it is. Here it is. BassApex Salvation. Much easier names to pronounce. And wow, I really hope this is an example of the good version of what I was talking about. Here we go. Woo! Here comes. was Salvation by BassApex. Cool. Wow. This track. Okay. Around halfway through it, I was thinking about, preparing my comments while listening to these things. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, we have to talk about the mix. They're going to talk about the master. It's a pretty good segue from the previous track to talk about, how sausagey this guy ended up when sort of the issues it created. But I was going to preface it by saying that all content-wise, sound design-wise, sample choice-wise, and arrangement, musical, everything about this track is perfect. And then I zoomed out and realized that I was, in fact, halfway through this track, and I realized, oh my god, it's okay, we're going to need to talk about arrangement too. Like, around when it got to be here, and I wasn't about halfway through, but like I zoomed all the way out there, and that was around where I was just kind of, this is like the encore of this section, and there's still more coming. I guess how long in the tooth is in the eye of the beholder. Wow, I hope that made sense. That might not have made any sense to anybody who's not a primary English speaker. That might not have made sense to anybody who's an English speaker. Point being is, if you don't think this is too long, I don't think anyone would care. Like, anyone who's listening to this is going to either be having it in a playlist or a mix. If they have it in a playlist, they're probably going to rock on this and having it in the background and just have a time with it. Like, it's not bad. Every individual section of this track is fine. It's just that there's so much of it, and it goes on for so long. But I do dig the epic vibe of it. I do dig the very large pendulum, Dirty Phonics-esque kind of cinematic production of it. But the mix is a thing to talk about. First off, your sub definition is spicy. It's in there, it moves, and a moving sub can be fun if it's like a thing you're focusing on, but you can't focus on it in this track because of how the way you've distributed the loudness of the individual elements. So that's the big number one problem, is like, you see how big this is. You're not used to seeing this visualization. If you see how big and bright these sections are, that's kick and snare hit, right? But the big brightness on the kick only extends to a certain degree, and then below this is this sort of average color temperature that seems as though this is the same level as everything else, and that's because it is, and that's an issue. If we kind of try and look at a general look at it from this sort of blurry, bright kind of distribution, that's sort of this track's story, is that it's very top heavy, and it's brought down on the lows as such so that it can be that loud, that top heavy, which is a good strategy, especially for what this sort of stuff usually is. Like, if we're talking about the Dirty Phonics pendulum style of thing, a lot of that is like rock influenced, right? Like straight up kind of almost metal rock, and that's how that stuff's mixed, and it's mixed that way because they play in tunings that make and bass guitars don't have sub definition either, so they can just do that. But we have sub definition, we want sub definition, so that means we got to prepare for it and mix for it, which means that loud other stuff just can't be that loud. I'll talk about the other stuff though, and the intro exemplifies another issue of this track quite well. There are like 5 leads in there, and I don't think most of them were designed to be leads. This is that they're at lead level. A lot of those arps and zippy zoops that are in there, like that stuff is like, and then there's like a saxophone, but then there's also a synth lead, and I dig the dueling solos and the conflicting harmonizing leads and that kind of thing, but they're usually distinct, and it's difficult to distinguish just about anything, and that's the primary mix problem of this track. And you solve that by doing what you might expect, which is to kind of bring down the things that are meant to be down. And one of those things that's meant to be a little bit more down than it is in this track is hi-hats. Everything that's a hi-hat in this song, bring it down by like 3 dB. Or, whatever, next time we do something like this, do that. Like, try not to have them be so hot. You did a pretty good job on your roll-off going up top here. This was a good choice insofar as how hard and how high to cut. Still kind of loud and clipping. That's fine. It sounds kind of dope. People who are like this kind of song probably don't care. So fine. But thought is that the focus of the spicy highness, if you kind of make it 2K, 5K, it starts to feel like the high frequency version of Muddy, which is this weird like not sharp enough sharpness where it's loud, it's high frequency, but it's more of this like burny, megaphony, distorty kind of thing than it is really true high frequency kind of pepper happening. And this is what that looks like. You can kind of see it better in the Scopy presentation up here. So if I were to carve that off, what I would do is this kind of section here, I put a big old hole in what the percussion is, because there's other stuff in there, and part of the reason why this is an issue is because of all the other stuff that also occupies that section, all the leads and arps, and also the frequencies that are in the basic stuff that's in there that's happening while this is happening, like all these layers coming together, which are beautiful things, really nice sounds that are really good choices to be where they are and doing all the right stuff. It's just that not that level, and not that level with all the rest of them at that level. Having said all of these things, the actual mastering of this is pretty much a-okay. Every kind of problem that I just described that you have with this song is basically entirely a mixed one. The way that you manage to crush it all together into something that's this crushed and this like this is fine. It's honestly very good for what the kind of content that you've put into it. The kinds of changes that I would make for this are just choosing how that stuff is going into what you already are doing. Yeah, dude. Anyway. That was BassApex Salvation. Moving on. Next up we have Bang by Apollo. Isn't that applicable? Cool beans. Here comes this. Bang! Here comes the beginning of this.
I'm not afraid to play hardball. Bang! Now, if any of you sons of bitches got anything else to say, now's the fucking time!
That was pretty sick. That was awesome. So, not that I care because I'm already not monetizing these videos, but you should probably put like an explicit lyrics tag up on there just so people are warned. But the thought is, on this track, super dope. Oh, and isn't it interesting that this track had basically a high cut at 90 hertz or lower, like not that much lower, and that's like not anywhere near where a regular sub bass level is. It's not for the notes that are being played, that's for sure. And that's the thing about these hardcore tracks. It's exactly what we were discussing before about level and sub loudness. Like rock and metal and certain other kinds of things are mixed that way because they can make it louder now that there isn't that much loudness in the sub. And then how far can you go with that? And this is an example of how far you can go with that. Where if you just don't have frequencies lower than that, like what is left can be driven a lot more, like you end up getting more loudness. Like this is how you make a thing louder, because a sub has power and we can feel that and all, but signal wise, it's not literally louder. It causes more time spent away from maximum position versus these guys, which are moving between maximum position now at a higher frequency. And that makes it, like, there's probably a math that makes it, I don't know how that equals out, but it makes it louder on like the average amount, because this one was good. I'm not actually sure if this track was louder than the previous one, but this one hit. It is that also part of it is like there was no just nothing about a part that was supposed to hit that was not hitting. In the other track, you could like lose the kick transient and with the impact on the ARP. But this track was very coherent. And like, where's that section? Was this one? Nope. Come here. I don't know if my section, my favorite section. Because I heard it and I was like, it feels nice. Wasn't it here? No, wasn't it here? I think it was this guy. Maybe. It was this guy. And then there was like a tom hit. Ooh, like that incredibly good mixing, because like this is in a very fast, very short period of time, and this is very full frequency, very loud stuff happening, and it cut, and you could feel it. You could feel that hit happen, and the next one came, and it wasn't like impeded by it. That is very good. This is extremely good stuff. Yeah, I can't really think of anything bad to say about it. Like it's not like too long. It still has fun, like cinematic moving around. I dig the quotes. I think that it's just like a flawless application of this genre. Good job, Apollo. Moving on to Day by Day by Tetrosphere. The title's in the file name. That's one of the rules in this submission, is that you gotta have things appropriately titled with the song name and the artist name visually clear so that I, can say it correctly when I get to this part. Anyway, here comes this. Yes. This is a very sick example of what old school dubstep would sound like if it could have been produced with modern like production techniques. Because this is a very good. This is a good that. And it also has an opportunity for us to look at an application of the layering stuff we were talking about one of the previous songs, about how you can have a lot of stuff happening, but it doesn't necessarily all have to be at the same level. So yeah, here we go. When this sweepy thing started happening, where did it go? Was it in here? Maybe. Was it out here? Could have sworn it happened by itself. Nope. Well, the intro works well. So yeah, you can plainly see just a very large variety of stuff happening, but other than like this is just higher frequency and things like that, but you can still tell that some stuff's louder and quieter than other stuff. There's background elements and like tiny bits of things that are happening, and they're not really all there, but the ones that are there are there. So when they can be on top of them, they are, and there's still stuff back there. You can hear them when like you can focus on them, but they're not like taking your mix for, you know, hostage. So I like that just about every main sound in this song could basically have been done with what like popular FM techniques were around in like the 2008, 2009 time. I had no idea how to do anything about FM back then. I learned a lot about it pretty much years after this sort of stuff was around. And I, to the point where I could not really assess the breadth of how many FM sounds were really sources of like a very similar like core group of stuff. And tracks like these will blow my mind apart because, and it's hard to recreate these sort of things exactly unless you have like the patterns for them, because you can get so much variation out of them without doing too much super tweaking. But that wasn't how I saw things back then. But this is just a good at that. And also, this is just the appropriate length of everything. Like, I've been harping on, like, people making the songs long, and, like, that's one of those personal taste things. Like, when I talk about things, like, mostly about, like, arrangement and section progression, I got some stuff to say about variations inside a section, but, like, as far as, like, how many sections, how long they are, that kind of thing, that is entirely just me having personal thoughts to say about that. I might, you know, call you out if you intro for 20 minutes into nothing, then I'll just be like, you just told myself. None of that was the language. Don't worry about it. But I think you get at this point. Like, if I say that, it's not like me damning your song. You probably feel the way about it, and if you feel that was fine, then I will take your word for it because it's your stuff. Next track is a word I am sure to mispronounce: Acouphene. Acouphene by Prysme. Prysme, the word that's not spelled right. And this word, which if it is a word, I'm sure it's spelled right. Can't pronounce this, can't pronounce that. Welcome to irony. Okay. Here comes this guy. Wait, nope. In the beginning. Yep, good. and that was Acouphene. It's probably Acouphene, right? Acouphene. It's like a brand name or something. By Prysme. Wow, town, wow, like. And you know, it's neat. We saw that like kind of old school track, and then we get this very, very new school interpretation of basically the same root. Isn't that great? I love that stuff. It's like what looking at generations in play, right? I'm not even gonna try to talk about the mix in this one because it just doesn't matter. People who are into this sort of thing, like, there's no amount of breakage that will be considered bad. It's short, but I mean, I guess if this is a whip, I guess you just double up on it and make some variations. And it won't be that much, but like whatever this is, if this is it, fine, I guess. It definitely got to the point in the intro, and I'm about that. I'm a fan of this. I like the kind of Bit Crush-esque sort of destruction effect happen on some of these sounds a bit and in the things. It wasn't typical, which is like basically what you're really trying for when you work on stuff like this, like the beat and the progression, if any, and the sectional timing, if any, is always going to be the same because that's what the genre is. So everything about it is basically you trying to come up with a thing that hasn't been done yet, because it's not even about verses or lines or melodies or progressions. It's about the sound design. And I love genres like that. Hard work, though. Good work, Prysme. My folders. Moving on. This is Wait For Me by Dryax. I guess your axe. Dryax. Never mind. Drakes. That was me. What's the word for that? Crap. That was me, that other wording for that word. Wow, my brain is on right now. But this song is too. Here it comes. Very well done. This is sort of closer to the ideal that I was discussing in the Salvation track. And it's basically just, it's got the carve in it that I was mentioning. The thought of like not being so top heavy. It's about as top heavy, like in real terms. Its fade into the high frequencies was less. It was still faded-ish, but there's still mostly just the big clip up there. So that means that these still have that higher frequency power, but then the 2K, 5K isn't as heavy as other stuff was. But the shelf all the way down was still about the right amount, but the kick and snare were still above it. This one has sub-definition that was more regular, but it's still a little bit lower than I would recommend for something like this. But the drum mix was pretty much flawless. No one anywhere would complain about like this track's mix, you know, like this is beyond acceptable. There were some fun sounds in here too. Like I dug some of the kind of razory, these dudes, and there was one in particular that also had a fun little visual tinge to it, just as a result of being in here. There's one. Look at that. Isn't that also fun to get the idea that like how that sounds is basically a product of like the filtered curve here. Like here's a low pass coming up, here's a high pass coming down. There's like this could be a bunch of stuff. Like I mentioned Razor, and this is kind of what Razor sounds like, so why not just say it's a Razor? But in Harmor, if I were to do this kind of thing, you could do it with the phaser, or you could do it with the bandpass, just automate through this filter stuff I just mentioned. Like it's just as easy as you can see it happen. And this stuff can get done with Unison, and like it's just so cool. So cool to see it in action too. And like it's songs like this would like the Salvation track would have been killer for me when I was like had first around discovered Pendulum. This also has plenty of like I liked the deeper edge it got kind of at the end here, but I also kind of think that should be more of this earlier. Like maybe even done like half in there. Like the progression was cool. Like I get hiding the power, you know, near the end there. It's just it does take a long time to get there. This is basically the full book, you know, and nobody blames anyone for writing the full book if the full book is there. This is not necessarily padded by any stretch of the imagination. It's still vast. Yeah. So good Jorbs that were done. We're good. This next track is called 353 by BowlG. And if this is the track I think it is, that was described as I thought it was, we will know. Or I will know. If I don't know, though, I'll have to conclude that I forgot which one it was that was described as such. And you have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's okay. I will explain myself after we play this song. So I'm considering doing lots of kind of visual renovations in how I do the VTRs. Like right now, I'm just using FL stuff to like do this kind of thing, and I can go a little harder about this. And one of the things I'm thinking of doing is putting in a counter for how many times I turn a track down when I'm listening to it, because numerous times I listen to tracks that do lots of things to me that I need to turn my thing down. And I've done it a few times already for tracks in this whole episode, but to this track will have had it 3 times. That would have been the result to see here. So, wow, super loud, way overdone with the loud, and also similar layering issues with some of the, like we discussed with previous songs. But I think this is actually the song that I think was described the way I thought it was described, which is to say that it was done with a DAW that only allowed a really limited amount of stuff, including like 2 effects per thing, and like that many things. And then they said that the cool extra stuff were things they had done on their modular. So I was kind of intrigued in that, which a little violates the random nature of how I'm supposed to select these things, but I saw the description. Anyway, that being the case, though, it didn't need to get as deep as it did. And this was also just way too long. Especially for what was happening here, like, and it's not just necessarily that like this has to be this long because this was that long, is that like because you're double timing it now, what worked for this long can only work for half as long, and if you do it for the same long, then wow, it's just doubling up too much, especially with how loud some of these layered bits are, and it's a difficult task when you're doing this kind of Skrillexy knife party-esque track. Because all of the material that's used to make it is this oversaturated, distorted junk that makes it basically impossible not to add up to this, which is the whole art of it. Is how do we turn it into the roughneck and not into I don't know what. But this wasn't that bad for having said that. Like, it's mostly just a leveling thing, like the other tracks that had the same issue with layers. I did like how big the sub separation was on lots of things. Like, this was a separated as hell sub, and this is also something that those older tracks did. The Skrillex and Zomboy at the time is part of why that worked, was because it didn't really matter what was happening up here as long as there was a hard enough transient cut and the sub was well defined enough and separated far enough away. Especially when played live, this stuff hits really, really hard, and it's why separate subs sound so good. And it wasn't really something I understood until I actually went to a show and heard it and felt it. Because up until then, I was mostly just relying on my own monitoring to determine whether or not the sub was good or bad or whatever. And like even in reference comparisons to stuff, I didn't really detect a huge difference between my stuff and even like Skrillex and whatever. And that's mix-wise for bass stuff. Obviously, I detected many other differences. But the point is that the mega loudness and solidified of your sub, wow, statements today, really go a long way to making a track feel like coherent and powerful on a live setting, and it kind of okay translates, especially nowadays. Stuff is just a lot better like at putting those frequencies out. It's like, and most of us are pretty good at putting them out loud, like not just in this track but lots of tracks today. I felt pretty high sub, and I've mentioned previous times a lot that I don't really have good sub monitoring on my main like listening speakers in my studio. That's something that I know about it, and I can compensate because I have lived here for enough years. But the point is that if I can feel sub, it means that there's way too much, and that's been most tracks today. Yeah, it's either been either or. Either there's been like not a whole lot of sub, or there's way too much sub. So, but you know, I prefer having way more too much sub than not enough sub. Yes, put that on a t-shirt. Alrighty then, that's about it for today. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day. Please stay safe and all that. Times are weird. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, and people have asked, like, for me, how I'm doing with quarantine, and like, I wasn't really doing much before this happened. Basically, the only thing that happened that really negatively affected me, other than that perhaps my mother may have been affected, was that the trip to Bali to do pitch got canceled. That's it. Everything else has basically been business as usual for me. Anyway, do stay safe and have a nice day.